perspective, must be concentrated. And the problem with the tar sands and the oil shales is that those things are locked up pretty tight. It's just very hard to get. In Canada, where they're getting more than 1 million barrels a day from oil shales, they're using stranded gas. Now, we say that gas is stranded when there's a lot of gas there and not very many people there, and gas is hard to move through pipelines because it's not very dense. And so they're using maybe more energy from natural gas than they're getting out of the oil, but never mind, they're producing oil at about $18 to $25 a barrel, and it's selling for $125 or $30 a barrel. So dollar and cents-wise, it's a very good idea.
Yeah, and we're not saying that future developments in American ingenuity might not be able to get that shale a little more economically, and that it is not part of the picture, but definitely we're going to have to. What would you see right now as the ideal circumstance from a bipartisan way? You've mentioned this bill, but in talking in everyday terms, what do you see happening? Flex vehicles or plug-in electricity? What would you see in the ideal situation? And I don't mean getting around as cheaply as possible. I mean an ideal in what we could be headed for if Congress were to work in a bipartisan manner and we put an effort like we did to get to the moon into getting alternate energy supplies.
Well, we certainly need to do that. Unfortunately, we have waited so long that now it's going to be very difficult. Our government paid for 4 studies. The first one was the big SAIC, very prestigious international science engineering organization. They did a study which was released in 2005. Called the Hirsch Report, and in that study they said that unless you anticipated the peaking of oil by 2 decades, with programs like we're now talking about, there were going to be meaningful economic consequences. If you anticipated it only 1 decade, there would be pretty severe economic consequences. If you waited until it happened, there are going to be really big economic consequences. And they said in the report that the world has never faced a problem like this. They said that the mitigation consequences would be unprecedented. And so, now we've waited until it's upon it. The Army Corps of Engineers did a study, also released in 2005. 2 studies released last year. The Government Accountability Office and the National Petroleum Council both released studies. All 4 studies have said that the peaking of oil is inevitable, that it is either present or imminent with potentially devastating consequences. Until very recently, that's just been ignored. Republicans, at the beginning of this session, we had a breakout session. We had a retreat down at the Greenbrier. We had a breakout session, and we had 7 sessions in this breakout session. One of them was on neighborhoods, and none of them was on energy.
Wow.
Just that recently, there was just total denial that there was any problem. Then gas went from $3 a gallon to $4 a gallon, and now suddenly it's on everybody's top concern list, and we hardly ever hear about the Iraq War. You hardly ever hear about illegal immigration anymore. It's now energy, energy, energy.
Well, the surge is
we waited so long.
The surge is working in Iraq, thank goodness. It's I know it's eggshells, but it is working. Maybe that's why we don't hear about that. But did I detect something when I picked up that special order, I guess it's called, on the floor the other night when Democrats and Republicans were talking together? I usually don't see that in energy, and they were going back and forth. And I said to myself, well, maybe even though Nancy's going to run out of town in her huge government-paid-for jet, maybe we're beginning to see the steps here towards some genuine bipartisanship.
Well, I hope so. I have joined what's called a center aisle coalition. The more conservative Democrats, they frequently sit right on the aisle next to the Republicans. And many of us on both sides, the blue dogs, I think there are 49 blue dogs in the Democrat Party that are more conservative than at least 50% of our Republicans. And there's any reason we can't join forces with them.
And some oil patch Democrats, right? I mean, that do necessarily, you may not agree with you on peak oil, but know that oil is still going to be part here, and some drilling would be wise. Congressman, can you answer before you go to a break? And we're kind of holding you over here now. I know you've got to get back to
I'm okay for a few minutes. They're doing a debate now on the motion to recommit, and so we have a little time.
Can you take a couple of calls?
Oh, I can indeed.
All right, let's go first to Kirk, who is calling us from the state of Delaware. Kirk, you're on with the Congressman. Your question.
I was listening to just the tail end of some of the talk last night about the bill, and just been listening this morning. Didn't know if anywhere in the bill here they were talking last night, I believe, about the using the nuclear waste, I guess getting spent energy out of that. Is there any provision in there for getting back on track, building nuclear plants, and looking at that as an alternative source?
Well, absolutely. The bill recognizes that nuclear has to be an increasing part of our future energy supply. By the way, that produces electricity. That's wonderful. But the real crunch in the future is not going to be so much electricity. It's going to be liquid fuels. With more nuclear, with more solar, with more wind, with true geothermal that is going down and tapping the heat in the molten core of the Earth. From microhydro, we can produce as much electricity as we ought to be using, maybe not as much as we'd like to use.
But there is a nuclear factor in this.
Absolutely a nuclear factor in there. It is strongly supported by the bill, and there's money in there to look. Most of the energy left in the fuel, it's still there when we take the fuel out with the technologies we're using. We don't have to do that. Anything so hot that I can't get near it for 250,000 years just ought to have enough energy there to do something with, I think. And there are some technologies out there that will do that.
All right, Gary in Catonsville, you're on with Congressman Bartlett with your question, please.
Yes, Congressman, with all due respect, this additional drilling is a sham. It's a payoff to the oil companies. They could drill tomorrow if they wanted to. They're sitting on capped wells. And let me ask you something.
No, yeah, ask a question.
How did you vote on releasing the strategic oil reserve? You voted against it, I'm sure, because the Republicans are against any kind of short-term help.
Well, I don't vote with the Republicans in lockstep on energy. I have consistently voted against drilling in ANWR and offshore and on public lands.
Did you hear that, Gary? You've consistently voted against it, Gary, but go ahead.
Until they made a commitment to use the revenues they got from that to invest in alternatives. I voted against taking oil from the SPRO for a couple of reasons. One, it is not a fix. It is a very short-term thing that would just be a sham. And secondly, that's there for a real emergency, which we could have any time. If the Israelis were to bomb Iran and they shut down the Straits of Hormuz, boy, we would exhaust that reserve, and we still wouldn't have anywhere near enough oil. In
56 days. And it would be interesting to me, people who, and I looked at it too, and then I looked at the purpose of it, and it is for emergencies. It is not, and this is a supply and demand thing, not necessarily an emergency.
You're exactly right. If this was an emergency and it would help, I would be all for it, but the problem would still be there.
The interesting thing is, Nancy Pelosi coming out for that, and the Democrats who did, and this Democrat who just called, at least it shows they know the fact that supply is important. Now, if it's important in a reserve we have for emergencies like a sinking in the Straits of Hormuz or Katrina, I think it may have been used then, certainly then, and I hear about all these leases that they currently have. The oil companies, I'm not a big fan of them at all, but they know that offshore it's there and can be gotten in a couple of years. They know where it is.
Well, the leases that they have, they're not drilling because they don't think there's any oil there. And I want them to release the leases. They don't need to be holding those things. There's no oil there because it gives the illusion that they're avoiding drilling in places where they might get oil, and that just isn't true. With oil at $120-some a barrel, everybody's drilling everywhere they think there's any oil. They just don't think there's oil there, and they think they'd lose money trying to find it. So
and it gives people like Nancy Pelosi or Dutch Ruppersberger or whoever get up and to say they have all these millions of acres. Dick Durbin, I heard him the other day. Give the leases back. The oil's not there. They know it's off the continental shelf. And I'm told that we hear these figures, and then we'll let you go because we have to go to a break, that it's 10 years down the road, it's 12 years, it's 8 years. Properly done in an environmentally safe manner, it could be coming online fairly shortly, within 24 to 36 months. And even the psychological effect when things happen nowadays, you folks are leaving town and the price of oil's going up.
Yeah, there are psychological effects, but ultimately market factors will control the price. Supply and demand will ultimately control it. There will be short-term psychological effects. That's true.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. And thank you for the good work you do. And I'm very proud of the fact that you vote the way you think you should vote, not based along party lines.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. That is Congressman Roscoe Bartlett. They should all vote the way that he votes. But I thought the strategic reserve, I was tempted by that. The more you read about it, the more you see, they ought to leave it alone, and they ought to just drill where they know the oil is, watch the price drop like a rock in water.